go. All right. Hello, everyone. How's it going today?
Excellent.
Ross, I like it. I like the enthusiasm. I appreciate it. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us. This is a pretty decent-sized crowd. I'm only slightly terrified. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing kicked off. But before we do, we're going to go over a little bit of history of this training and how it was developed and the purpose. Unfortunately, Mr. Paul Casey can't join us today. He had a family emergency that he had to take care of. So I'm going to be speaking on his behalf and maybe hosting a conversation between myself and myself to kind of stimulate the flow of things. This is supposed to be fun, I'm sorry. So, my name is Eric Burns. I am currently the lead suicide prevention peer specialist for the suicide prevention program, though I am stepping out of this position. Effective September 1st, I will be the Veteran Peer Services Program Manager, working with our VET course and with our Veteran Peer course as well. So, a whole lot of shifting hats, but it's all good. We're making some leaps and bounds in our programs, and we're developing these educational pieces to work with you and the communities that we're engaging with constantly. So, a little bit about this training. Originally, it was developed to be provided to employers and supervisors that had veteran employees that they engaged with. What they were finding was that there was a cultural difference between the two populations, our civilians and our veterans, and a lot of headbutting was occurring and not a lot of working together to make a cohesive unit. So this was developed before I came into the agency, but they were going out into these work environments and giving these trainings. And they actually found that the veterans that were embedded in there who weren't identifying themselves were resonating with these trainings. They had individuals who were coming up to them, breaking down in tears, Vietnam War era veterans that were just shocked at how little they knew about how their own shift from their culture to the civilian culture was affecting them, their behavioral health and their well-being. So we linked up together and we started revamping this program, and a team of, I want to say it was 4 or 5 veterans, myself included, in the DVA, worked together to create this presentation to be a little bit more inclusive, not just in an employer setting, but just in general, right? So that we can actually start bridging the gap between the two cultures. So we've had the opportunity to give this training, and it's a hit every time. And so the disclaimer is this is death by PowerPoint. Let's be honest, right? It's a PowerPoint, right? But this is best facilitated as a discussion. We need you to engage with these trainings, this one specifically, because we take your feedback and your perceptions and how you live your life, your experiences, and we take it and we revamp this almost every single time. We add a little bit more information in there, we hear it a little bit more, and it's more relevant and it's more useful to the communities that we work with. So, let's go ahead and get started. So we have 3 objectives today. First and foremost, we want to talk about what's called the battle mind to home mind mentality, right? The war zone mentality and how you can be a liaison between the two cultures. If you had the opportunity to sit in on the Learn training yesterday, they tapped on it a little bit with Brett. Just a disclaimer, I'm nowhere near as funny as Brett, but I will do my best to keep you all thoroughly entertained. We're going to describe the second mission and how you and the veteran that you work with, or if you are the veteran, maybe the civilian counterpart, can work with each other to help you grow or help them grow. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some promising best practices that will support veteran development in your organization or your culture. So this training can be tailored a little bit, right? Maybe it's for a work environment, maybe it's for an academic environment. It's really very fluid, it's very flexible, and it can be applied in a variety of situations. Let's go ahead and get started on the first one. Before we begin, as I mentioned, this is best facilitated as a discussion. I want each and every one of you to feel as though you have a voice. There's no wrong answers. There's no wrong experiences. This is an opportunity for you to actually express yourself. Maybe there's something in here that we don't cover, and you want it to be heard. I want to hear it. So please, give me your voice. We also respect and acknowledge that everybody has a different experience, and it might not necessarily resonate with you, and that's okay. Because, like I said, everybody's experience is going to be different. You've lived your life. Maybe you're a veteran, maybe you're a civilian, maybe you're a spouse of a veteran or a service member. Everybody's going to have a different little piece of the pie that encompasses our veteran culture. Not all veterans' experiences are the same. So that's 100% true, right? You have medics, you have infantrymen, you have cooks, you have mechanics, you have paratroopers, you have all sorts of MOSs. There's a couple hundred of them, right? Not everybody's going to have seen combat. Not everybody's going to have received the same training. Not everybody's going to have been to the same duty location. There's a lot of different pieces in there. Not all veterans are broken, angry, and unstable. So this is a stigma that we're working to fight against. Because very oftentimes you have veterans that get out of the military with absolutely no behavioral health diagnosis whatsoever. And maybe there is a reason for it to be there, and it's not true. So it's kind of difficult to just put one lens on every single veteran that you encounter. And I'm sure that there's some veterans in the audience that had that negative experience before. I'm not going to call you out individually and ask you to identify yourself because we want you to feel comfortable. However, if you are a veteran, please talk about your experiences. One does not need to have been in combat to be a veteran. This is something that we encounter a lot. When we're working with our veteran communities, we ask them about their service. They don't identify as a veteran. Maybe it's for a couple different reasons. They didn't see combat, right? And so we've changed the language as we work with our veteran communities to ask, instead of, are you a veteran, have you ever served in our armed forces? Regardless of whether you spent a month or 20 years, you're a veteran. When you got out, because you volunteered, you signed that white dotted line, and you gave yourself to your country. As far as we're concerned, you're a veteran. So, there's an opportunity for some engagement. If I get some people to tell me, maybe from their own experiences, maybe from working with some veterans or service members, what are some of the strengths, skills, values that are gained by those who have served? What have you seen in your experience? Yeah, go ahead.
Self-discipline.
Self-discipline. Absolutely. Yeah.
It gave me the confidence to know that I can do anything that I want to do.
Yeah.
That I can succeed in anything that I choose.
Yeah. I will never fail.
Exactly.
Community.
Yes.
Part of the team.
Part of a team.
Work
Cohesive
ethic.
unit. Absolutely. Work ethic. Any others?
Integrity.
No. Integrity. Those are great. Those are some great examples. Take a look at a couple of them. Some of them were tapped on. Leadership and ethics. From the day that you joined the military, you were trained that you're a leader. Whether you're a private or a colonel or whatever rank you end up being, you are leading from the front at all times. Because you are the line of defense. You are the freedom fighters that go out into battle to protect your country. You have to be a leader. You have to be disciplined. You have to be willing to engage with your team, show them the right path, and lead them to safety or to achieve the objective. Experience working in diverse teams and organizations. That was another one that was brought up. I come from an Army background. We had every race, creed, color, religion, sexuality, identity that you could possibly think of. We have to work together in the military and put aside our cultural differences so that we can get to our mission objective. Character. I heard integrity. Truth. Honor. Working with your team. Adaptable. I don't know if you've ever met an E4 in the military. But they're adaptable. I can speak from experience. I was an E4 before I was retired out.
Semper Gumby.
You give them an objective that they don't necessarily want to do, they're going to get real flexible in their methodology and figuring out how to do it with a minimal amount of effort so that they can get out of there as quickly as humanly possible. Self-starter, strong work ethic. I challenge you to find a single service member that doesn't have a strong work ethic. Or somebody who's not willing to jump at the opportunity to make a significant difference in the world. Take the lead at leadership, right? Technical skills and experiences. I mentioned, there's a couple hundred MOSs out there, military occupational specialty. So maybe you have a veteran that was a medic. They have medical technical skills, or somebody who works in mechanics. It's a lot of technical skills. But each MOS comes with a unique set of skills that's instilled upon them when they're in their advanced individual training or whatever the title is for the different branches of the Army, so mobile shelter. Strong performance under pressure, it's the first thing you think of. War, combat. That's a lot of pressure. You have bullets flying at you, you've got people screaming at you, you've got IEDs blowing up, you've got your leadership shouting at you at the same time, dust is flying in the air, blood's all over the place. That's a lot of pressure, but that's just combat. That's just in war zone. I talk about war zone mentality, and we're going to hit on it later on, but there's a strong need to perform under pressure, even garrison. Your job saves other people's lives. You don't do your mechanical checks the right way, something falls apart. Somebody doesn't put a parachute the right way in the bag. Somebody's going to get hurt. Creative problem solving. I mentioned that earlier with our E4s, right? What's the best way that I can get to my objective with the minimal amount of effort and still be able to make sure that everybody's okay?
Give it to an E4 and tell them they can go home when they're done.
Exactly. Thank you. Perfect. Yes. Especially if it's a Friday.
Or use the E4 mafia to get what you need. I mean, just network.
More than once.
Yep. Absolutely. Resiliency and flexibility, that just comes down to military training in general. You have to be flexible. Right? You have to be able to move around your objective. You need to be a creative problem solver. You need resiliency and flexibility. When we think resiliency, it's not just necessarily being able to maneuver around a problem. It's the ability to see the objective at the end of the problem and navigate whatever challenges that are going to be in the way. Loyalty to the employer. We're taught our leadership. We work under a chain of command. It's instilled trust that you work together. Trust each other with your own life. And they trust you with theirs. That requires a significant amount of loyalty and trust. And then mission focused. I will never quit. I will never fail. I will achieve the mission. At the end of the day, the mission is overall. Getting to that end goal, that checker flag at the end to say, yes, we achieved the mission. You can go home. Everybody's okay. So this is a lot. The ton of information, we're going to go through it step by step. But this is our war zone mentality. Now I mentioned, when we're thinking about war zone mentality, we're thinking about battle mind and home mind, we're not necessarily talking about combat specifically. Now, war zone mentality is taught from the day that you enter the military. I'll get out of the way. I'm standing right in front of the screen. Apologies. But we're taught at the very beginning how to live within a war zone mentality. You have to constantly be ready to engage, fight, and destroy the enemies of the United States of America. Well, maybe that might not necessarily look like bullets flying downrange, but it could look like supporting those who are. So we have two concepts here. We have battle mind and we have home mind. And so when we're looking at these battle mind topics, these concepts, they're coming straight from the military. These are things that most military people know. Maybe the language is a little different, but when we're looking at home mind, what we're looking at is the transition from military to civilian. Now, as a disclaimer, we're not saying that everybody who has a battle buddy in the military is going to get out and they're going to be isolated. We're not saying that everybody who has had to use targeted aggression in a combat situation is going to go on to have quick reactions and frustrations. What we're saying is this is a possibility. And we're talking about the extremes because these are the things that rear their heads when we're engaging with other cultures and people don't necessarily understand why things are happening. So keep that in mind as we walk through some of these, that it's not the catch-all be-all, it's not the 100% definition.
Yeah. If somebody had showed me this 40 years ago, I would have had a screwed up life until I figured out what this is all about. I still have an automatic rifle in the house. I don't go out in crowds. I said, went back to the wall. Not very communicative in my marriage at all. All because nobody focused on this back in Vietnam.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot, especially from the Vietnam era generation. We get that all the time. I wish somebody had just talked to me about these things. This is why we catered this, to be able to work within the community, not just with others, because it's so beneficial. So let's dive into it a little bit. So So the first thing that we have here, who had a battle buddy in the military? You have that person that's to your left and to your right. From the day that you get into basic training, you're taught you take your battle buddy wherever you go, whether it's in the bathroom or the CEO's office or it's the chow line. And then you go to your next duty station and you bond with somebody there, and now you have a new battle buddy. And then you go to your next duty station, you bond with somebody there, and you have your new battle buddy there. And then you go to combat, and you've got a whole platoon of battle buddies. Men and women who are willing to put down their lives to make sure that you get home. People that you trust. It's a trust that's built in the forges of fire, battle, combat, hardship. Now, take somebody that's been in the military for a couple of years, maybe 4 years, 5 years, maybe 20 years. And they've had this support system, this battle buddy that's been with them. And then they get out. And they go from Fort Drum, New York to Tacoma, Washington, where none of their families is. Maybe none of their friends are there. And they don't have it. Now, what can that look like? Well, if you're lucky and you've had the history of a good upbringing, and maybe you have some good conflict resolution skills, and you're going to be okay. Right? You're a social person, you can connect with other individuals, and you can foster new relationships. But maybe you're completely isolated, you're alone, in a brand new state, nobody that you connect with. What can that look like? You start isolating, you start withdrawing. You don't have anybody that you can lean to, because who is there that you can trust? After so many years of having somebody to your left and to your right that you can lean on, to have it suddenly stripped away from you, it's lonely. Accountability and control. We all have our roles, we have our responsibilities, we have our moving pieces. We work with other individuals who may be either to our left, right, up, or down, but we're accountable for all of our moving pieces, and we have to have control of those things, because if we don't track them, people get injured, people die. So you work your entire life, and you've got a pretty good system that you're working with, and you know where all your paperwork goes, all your nuts and bolts and screws, and all your rifle parts, and your medical equipment. And then you get into the civilian side, and everything's just fine. You get a brand new job, and you're starting to work within the community, and now you've got to share some responsibilities. Now you have to divvy that up. Give those to some other individuals. You don't have nearly as much control. That can be something that's difficult to overcome as somebody who's getting out of the military. Because what if somebody doesn't do it right? Well, is anybody going to be injured? Probably not. But that mentality that somebody will be injured, or somebody could die, doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just vanish into thin air because suddenly you don't have a rifle in your arm all the time. So details continue to remain important. And what I would argue that you'll find that for veterans that work within your communities or your respective organizations, they're probably, hopefully, kick myself in the butt if I'm wrong, but very detail-oriented, very organized, like to have structure. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can hinder some things when it becomes over excessive. Targeted aggression. How many of them had to deal with targeted aggression in their military career? 2, 3, 4, a couple individuals. What was your experience with it, if you're willing to share?
Go in and destroy.
Go and destroy. Pretty much the same, right?
Here's your target. Make it happen.
Right.
Or just anything that comes in the sector, it's your job to take a
stays with you. It doesn't just disappear.
So you were asking about like the transition period, and this really isn't me. This is my dad. My dad was a Vietnam Army veteran, but I remember, and he got married to my mom when I was born after he was separated. So I was like maybe 6 years old and we lived in the same house that he grew up in. And so the phone number was the same. And he had gone out one night and he called and I answered the phone. And he asked for Mrs. Turler, which he was thinking it was his mom that he was asking for. He didn't know that he was married. He didn't know that he had kids. And that's something that, and there were other things that happened too, but it doesn't just affect the individual. It affects their entire family. And that's something that, I mean, I'm 46 years old, you know, and it's something that I remember now. It made that much of an impact.
Yeah, these things, they're complex and they don't just disappear, and they're wide-reaching. They affect tons of people, whether they're family members or co-workers or friends or just allies. It's a lot. And there's a lot of hurt individuals out there that unfortunately have experienced the mistreatment that they did. And that's why we're working to bridge this gap. Hopefully it sticks. So, taking a look at tactical awareness. What's tactical awareness look like?
I know where every exit is. I know what is on the other side of every exit. I know what it's going to take to get through the person that's sitting in front of that exit.
Having an awareness of your surroundings, having the knowledge of what you need to do to navigate through those surroundings, being able to identify threats that might not be inherently known. Survival skill. So, tactical awareness can look a lot like hypervigilance when you get out. I can't put my back to it. I can't go into a Walmart because there's so many people constantly swarming around you. You've got faces that come left and right. You're supposed to be the one that's trained to identify threats. Maybe the faces don't look like the enemy, but you can't determine those individuals are friend or foe. Anxiousness in crowds, as I mentioned. When I first got out of the military, I refused to go into a Walmart. Absolutely refused. I wouldn't go into Target, I wouldn't go into a Safeway. I couldn't do it. I could not function in a crowd. Yeah.
0809, the big threat in Iraq was overpasses. And I got home, and that day we did our welcome home formation thing. The governor came and talked, and a couple of generals. The 45 minutes, my family's right there. Right. We get all done. Get in the truck with the wife to go home because we had the weekend off. And heading down I-5, stopped in the middle lane at an overpass. And I just stopped.
Right, because what were you looking for?
Threats everywhere. But it was like full traffic. Traffic wasn't moving slow. I mean, speed limit traffic. And I just stopped in the middle of I-5.
See the trash bag on the side of the road, and maybe your mind instantly fleets, is that right? Or a cardboard box. Or perhaps, you see somebody that looks like they might be up to something that they shouldn't be. What are you supposed to do? Do you engage? Do you warn somebody? When you're in the military, it's pretty cut and clean. Get rid of the enemy, force leadership, all your orders. All now you're a civilian. What does that look like? Who am I supposed to tell? Police, perhaps. Maybe you're a police person. People down in the shop. Don't know them. And let them know. Or you internalize it. You just let it compound. It get worse and worse. Next thing you know, you're not going into a Walmart. Lethally armed. This is a fun one. Everybody has an opinion about being lethally armed, and that's okay. When you're in the military, your firearm is an extension of yourself. It is your arm. You take it with you everywhere that you go. You maintain it, you clean it, perform maintenance on it, fire it, qualify with it. You're taught this is what will be used to protect your loved ones. You will use this to engage with your enemy. And that's a very, very important thing to keep in mind when we're working with our veterans, because it is part of themselves. Now, going into the civilian side, there's a lot of conflicting opinions about being lethally armed. I'm not going to poke and prod about that. That's not what we're here to do today. We're not going to talk about politics. But I will say that there is a very large stigma surrounding our veterans and being lethally armed. Are they lethally armed and dangerous? Or are they lethally armed and protectors? And that perception is going to vary, no matter who you are. I can't give you the right answer to that, and I never will. But it's just something to keep in mind that after working with these lethal killing machines as a tool to protect your loved ones, being asked to be no longer associated with them is asking them essentially to cut off their arm. Emotional control. That's a huge one. You have to have emotional control in a stressful situation. When you're in combat, you can't lose your head. People get injured, people get killed. When you allow intense emotions to take over the battlefield, throw out the logic. Maybe you have somebody that was very close to you that was killed in action in front of you. Maybe several people. Maybe you just so happen to be unfortunate enough to witness an absolutely catastrophic event, a horrific event. You have to control those emotions. You need to still be able to put your right foot in front of your left foot. Continue pushing. And then you get into the civilian side, and maybe you've been in such high stress with such high adrenaline and anger that you completely numbed yourself. Can't engage. You're unable to process through things in a healthy way. You detach.
I've noticed that, I didn't think I had any struggles transitioning out of the military. I'm pretty friendly, so I make friends pretty easily. But a few things that I did learn transitioning into the civilian world is that civilians don't like people who are really direct. It's rude to them. And I've brought people to tears when we were on a mission or going towards an objective together, and their priorities were not the same as mine. And so reevaluating and learning to ask civilians what their priorities are and objectives are for our common goals, which I would think would be complete success, but it's different for them. And then also, as far as the emotional control, like when it's kind of to your point, when you come out of the military, when do you learn how to ask yourself, how do I feel about this again? Because when you're in the military, you never are asked, you have to do this thing. How do you feel about that? How does that make you feel? And so I think that I've just been reading Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, and she's saying that the more emotions that we can actually sit with and feel and not take action on, the more powerful we are to walk through and navigate the human experience. But what I was trained is the only emotion that matters is anger, because that's the only thing I can do anything with. And it's ruined relationships for me. And anyways, so I feel like we need training to retrain ourselves to sit with the plethora of emotions that exist in human life.
Absolutely. It's a skill that unfortunately gets squashed in the military. Be able to just be with it. It's okay to feel emotions. It's going to happen.
I don't know how many of you paid attention to Mr. Bruno's conversation when he started talking about the brain. I think he reached the point right out that his emotions are getting to this and get out of here. He's got a rough go. He runs a vet service desk organization. He's a BSO. He's totally involved. I think he got the point of memory stuff doing it. So that's how it works.
And I encourage you to follow suit if you need to.
those skills in the way that I was trained to use them. Being there made it me being there possible to continue that knowledge for the people who did go. Training and those skills, and there would have been that continuous line of knowledge.
And you ask yourself, what's the point? And that's how the spiral starts. And that's why we're seeing an uptick. What was the point? You had something on page 2.
There is a difference. I was drafted. If I wasn't drafted, I wouldn't be here. I say that anybody that talks to me about it. They tell me, oh, consider nothing. I would have. Interesting enough, my current boss, he volunteered. He's 4 years. And he's really proud of what he accomplished, what he did. My boss before him, he was a 6 years. He volunteered. And none of them went to combat. Talking about, being trained, the skills you learn. I was a goddamn killer. That's all basic training taught me. They didn't teach me to do anything else but kill. And I tell that, I have no problem telling that. It I found it real hard to say I learned the skill. Because I did, I learned to kill. That's all basic training taught me to do. I sent to AIT, they said I was teaching to be a helicopter mechanic. Got to Vietnam. I was a Durban crew chief. And again, again, the skills, I knew how to shoot. I was hunting all my life and stuff like that. So I wasn't taught any skills whatsoever. I was taught skill of sitting out a helicopter. Because we go out in the morning, we go out troops in the morning and go get them at night, and there'd be parts of them, or they'd be bleeding all over, and it was just a big mess. And it really, what scared me, it still scares me. For 3 weeks, I think it was, I was scared shitless. I was really scared. I got that helicopter and go, because you know what you're going to happen here. And after that was just like a job. Go to the helicopter, load my gun, and load my M60, and then put all around, BS with the one officer and the other cohorts, and we take off. Go and do the same thing. Bring out the live, bring back the dead.
It sounds like you had to learn a lot of skills in the environment that you were working in. It wasn't necessarily passed down to you to teach your students in the environment. Some of those things are your survival skills. You had to learn how to.
But after a while, like Judge said, it bothered me for 3 weeks. And the 4th week, it was good. I didn't feel it anymore. Just like coming here. You come here and sit and listen and take part and then go. It's over with.
I hope it's not over with. Once we're done. I'd like to say that.
there is a big difference between being drafted and having.
There's kind of a third version almost. Yes, I volunteered, but the way my family was, the way I grew up, it wasn't a question of whether we were going to join the military or not. My brothers and I. You know, it was, you will be joining the military. Every male in my family has been military one way, shape, or form, Ireland, through the United States. I have one grandpa that was World War II, Korea and Vietnam, shot down in Korea and Vietnam. You know, I mean, and we, but every male in my family, and some of the females, have served. And it wasn't a question. It was, you're going to turn 18 and you're going to go to college, or you're going to go to the military. Take your pick. And then when you graduate college, you're going to join the military.
Hopefully get the officer. Oh, I'm sorry. We have my here.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think that you really can't compare the experiences of individuals who were drafted in the Vietnam era to the experiences of individuals who volunteer now to go into the military for a number of different reasons. But really what it boils down to is that there are so many variables between the two that it's like comparing apples to oranges, and it really just doesn't work. I mean, even on the face of it, is if you just look at when we come home, right? There was no reception, right? There was no good reception when you came home from Vietnam. You were spit on, you were called these nasty names. You were not considered a good person. But now you come back and it's a more welcoming reception, right? You can't, there really is no comparison of the two eras. It's not fair to either one to try to compare them.
I think comparing Vietnam draftees to any other U.S. military service, to include draftees from World War I and World War II, is more drastic than comparing apples to oranges. I think it's like comparing apples to carbon. You know, it's two entirely different worlds.
Well, and I think it's true for every era. You have to look at every era on its own merit, because they all come with their own, their own culture, right? Their own individual challenges that they had to embrace. Hell, when people came home from World War I, they didn't know what PTSD was, right? PTSD was not a thing until really the Vietnam era, right? Shell shock, but it was something that was just, it's there.
But
right?
like World War I, World War II draftees, they came home ticker tape parades and they were heroes. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
That's what I meant by, I think comparing Vietnam to any other era is way more drastic than apples and oranges. I think you could do World War I draftees, World War II draftees like apples to oranges maybe, right? But Vietnam's completely its own career.
Yeah. And then there's Korea too. I mean, Korea's forgotten about all this.
I do want to address your question.
I just have more of a comment. I think that in the military, there's so much focus. I'm not a veteran. I'm a child and spouse of veterans, but there's so much focus on the job that you're trained to do. And it's a lot of people, veterans I speak with, when they exit, they think that their skill set that they deliver to the community or to the employer is based on that one MOS job that they have, versus the whole person and the leadership and the other character traits and experience and skill set that they have outside of their MOS. The person is what contributes to the community, and the person is what contributes to the workplace. It's bigger than MOS. This gentleman, when you were talking about your skill set that you learned, I think we have to do better as a veteran serving community to talk about your more than your MOS, more than the one job you learned.
That was something I struggled with as well when I got out of the military. I was 9, and I saw a lot of horrific things. I didn't want to be a medic.
One thing that probably nobody thinks about, in Vietnam, there were no cell phones, there were no telephones. If you were lucky enough to get a letter home and back, you're looking at probably 3 to 4 weeks. In my case, they lost me and they sent all the mail back. And this is an APO. So my mother didn't hear a word for 6 months, dead or alive. Those aren't uncommon situations. And it was, like I said, if you're lucky enough to get to where it had a moon station where they would bounce some messages off the moon, if you're aware of that, how you do mom over and that routine. That was your only communication. My son-in-law was in Iraq. He was on the internet with my daughter almost every night. There's a huge difference of that. You're away and you're really on your own.
100%. My experience in Afghanistan, I was very fortunate to be in the generation I had this admins on Facebook and just computers to access and stay in contact with my wife and my kids.
I was just going to say, when somebody talked about coming home, and we landed in Alaska that day, and I think it's pretty good. And I was there for a couple of days, and he put us on buses. And the buses, looked like they were goddamn business buses. They wire stuff. Crap, what the hell did I do? They deserve this. And they had MDs. Well, the bash end of just put in a hash. And all this time, you had experiences with MDs. You don't mess with those guys. Big turkey, But anyway, and they got us off the bus. They made us march to the back door of the airport. Yeah, something's wrong. That's it. What did we do? We're all kind of thinking, talking with ourselves. And as soon as they opened that damn door, there must have been hundreds of people. Must do, they must do this every other month or so, every week, because there's hundreds of people there. They just all start hollering and stuff like that. And they go, oh, that's what it is. And then they told us, you guys, if you're flying, wherever you're flying, buy civics. So, where you go?
Identify yourself.
Yeah. Go ahead, and they had stories, especially, oh yeah, so bought a t-shirt and pair of jeans and headed home. And when I got home, they said, who are you doing? I was in my own duffel bag. They told me not to travel with it.
Imagining having to put your life on the line, and then when you get home, your life is still on the line. Never got that reprieve. Never got that safety, that comfort, that welcome. It's terrible. Part of the reason why we have a generation that's so scarred. And some of them are trying to work to fix. We can't fix the problems of the past. But we can use the lessons of the past to take forward. Thank you. I really appreciate your stories. I appreciate your engagement. Every time I engage with an audience, I get these new experiences. It just makes me a little bit more knowledgeable to the things I didn't know. So thank you. I really appreciate it. So our last two, our individual responsibility. It ties with our emotional control. We're responsible for all of the things that we do and all of the pieces. And they share these three, the need for structure, the guilt and loss, the control of emotions. They're very similarly related. Getting into the civilian side, maybe you feel as though you still need to control those emotions. You still need to keep them withheld. Or perhaps you're so desensitized that you are still numb from your experiences. The guilt and the loss that probably follows deployment. You lose a battle buddy. Why did I survive? Why am I still here? Am am I responsible for those individuals that died or were injured? They had families. I have. And having a need for structure, it's a need for control. You spend your military career in chaos and fire and flames. You need to control whatever you can in order to be successful, or at the very least continue to survive. And then our next one, discipline and order, right? Service members are disciplined professionals, crisp and clean, able to achieve a mission, reach their objective, and they require order to do so. Everything has a system, everything has a place, there's a process to go through. There's people that you have to clear things through. And then you get into the civilian side, and gosh darn it, it's 5 minutes late to the meeting again, there's no order with this generation.
Those damn millennials.
Those damn millennials. But in the civilian side, being 5 minutes late, unless you're law enforcement or paramedic, not necessarily going to end up with taking lives or injuries or anything. I hope, anyways. And that can be a difficult barrier to cross once you get into your academics, right? You're going to have students, talking to our Fed Corps members and the audience. You're going to have students that don't come from a military background. And you might find yourself twitching a little bit at their lack of discipline or their lack of respect towards a professor. That was a big one I encountered.
So I used to work for a program called the Transit Program, which is a pre-college program. And we got federal work study students, not VA work study students, but federal work study students. So most of them was like their first job. And I was the one that was responsible for them. And I probably had about 3 or 4 of them go away crying. But it was because I had expectations, right? And they didn't seem like unreasonable expectations to me. Like I expected them to be able to take an appropriate phone message. I expected them to be able to alphabetize files, right? So these to me were not unreasonable expectations. However, I learned, I guess it was a terrible learning curve, but I learned that I couldn't expect something from them if I hadn't taught them how to do it.
We're gonna talk a little bit. There's gonna be some group activities. I know everybody enjoys doing. How you can facilitate changing that mentality. Yes.
I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this emotional control, and you have detachment. For me, in the military, it was about attachment.
Yeah.
I'm post-Vietnam, and it was all about working with foreign students and dignitaries that came from different countries. And part of my job was to make friends for the sake of our nation. And the shame and the guilt that came after 9/11 for making friends with these people that came back to the soil, that came to our soil, these folks that I made friends with. I don't know, I'm sitting here shaking inside. I keep going back to that piece, that emotional control, and the anger that comes up, not being properly acclimated back to not making the attachments, but taking the skills that I learned in the military and continuing to make nice, on my own soil once again, and to how how do you transition? And I'm not, this is rhetorical. I had to take my own individual responsibility, my own individual discipline, and order my own self. Just because of the anger. The anger was too much. 9/11 hit and I was ready to go to battle, but denied the opportunity, I don't know. That detachment, that wasn't my life in the military. It was attachment.
I really appreciate the alternative perspective. It's very useful and something I haven't considered in the past. So thank you. We will be taking that. So this has been a lot, right? This is our meat and potatoes section of this training. I want to make sure that any confusion or questions are addressed before we move on to the next section. Is there anything in here that didn't stick with you? As you just mentioned, the attachment and detachment. Is there any conflicting information in your heart or in your head? It says, no, that's not my experience. I didn't have to be making quick decisions. I was feeling hurt.
So I was not in the military, my dad was, and the discipline and order, that kind of stuck out to me because what I've heard a lot is, you have specific ideas of what other people are supposed to have for civilians. And that isn't my experience. My dad has a traumatic brain injury, and he forgets some things, and he does not have, from my experience, does not have specific times of which, if we're going to the grocery store at 2 o'clock, he doesn't go then, he'll go later because he forgets, or it's just oh, I need to do that, but I don't, it's not important, I have something else so since I can remember if my mom wasn't there to help him, we need to go at this time for your doctor's appointment because you need to be there at this time. I was the one who was hey Dad, we have a VA appointment at 12, so we have to leave at 10 because it takes 2 hours to get there and we need a little bit more time to get checked in and sit down for a little bit, so decompress from the way here before we go to our appointment. And because of that, I have a problem with expecting people to do things my family, if, again, a doctor's appointment or a grocery store, we say that we're going to leave at 2 o'clock. I'm expecting us to leave at 2 o'clock. So while my dad does not have specific expectations for people, I do. So I just figured I'd share that because it affects me.
Absolutely.
I can attest to what she said. I'm a veteran. I'm married to a severely injured veteran. I'm his caregiver, and our daughter is just this amazing person who has the point blank, everything should be done in a specific way.
From point A to point B.
Point A to point B for every detail of everything. She went to the University of Washington and finished within 2.5 years because she had that discipline that she picked up on, I think, partially from both of us, but also because of the circumstances that she's in with 2 veteran parents, she had to learn that.
I'm hearing a lot of transference of skills and mindsets from generation to generation. It's interesting.
Not generationally, but I do know that one of my friends, some close friends, is Marine veteran. He saw a lot of small matters. And so his my interactions awkward ways sometimes, because I learned to like be direct and knowing exactly where I'm going, and having the shortest route possible to wherever our destination is, as strengths, and I've used it as a success in every avenue that I've gone on. But then when I try to communicate those things with him and we're in the same car, it triggers him and brings up things, and he goes into like a battle mindset. Oh my gosh, the garbage bag blowing down the street is going to blow up. And so I think that having that flexibility with people that have had different experiences in the military and with their military experience is really important for employers, and it's really important to know when interacting with us, because as much as being on time and being direct and getting things done is important to me, for him, he needs that allowance of like, you're in the civilian world, everything's okay. Nothing's here to stress you out or spaz you out, and you're not going to die today. And so I think that is important to mention.
It's amazing how the military culture is spread. Even those that aren't necessarily military, it's embedded in our culture, in our society, in our nation. I guarantee you, if this is your first time ever interacting with a military member or a veteran, I guarantee you you've interacted with them in the past before. I don't think that's the case in this particular so, we'll go ahead and keep moving. I do want to be cognizant of time and be respectful of the window that we have. So, as a result of military training experiences, we have some beliefs and values that a veteran can have and walk away from, right? I will never fail, or in Soldier's Creed. I will respect authority, I live in selfless service, I give my life for you. Mission overall, at the end of the day, the mission is what needs to be achieved. No matter what we have to overcome, no matter what the adversity is, we have to get to the end. Success is a matter of life and death. Success is a matter of life and death. It's important to keep that in mind. Because that's what you're trained from the day you start. And then you get out. Success is a matter of life and death anymore. Quick decisions save lives. We talked about that a little bit. You don't understand me or my background. I know that resonates in this room. I can feel it resonate in this room. That's why we have these trainings. That's why we're trying to develop these programs so that we can show civilians what our culture is, where we're coming from. We're people too, just like you. They breathe air. I do a lot of stuff. So they do it. I can never show weakness. I know I've heard this one. I've heard other individuals say it too. I can't process through this because if I do, it's going to show a chink in my armor. Something that I had to forge myself so that I could be protected. I can't talk to my wife. I can't talk to the kids. I can't talk to my counselor. Who am I supposed to talk to? I have to be the standing stone in which I raise everybody else up on. I can't ask for help. It took me quite a while to start asking for help. I had a lot of encouragement. No gray areas, no gray thinking, right? The world is about absolutes. It's black and white. This is right. This is wrong. This is on time. This is late. Changing that mentality. There is room for gray area thinking. It's not just cut and dry. I must contain emotion. Because if I don't contain emotion, people die. If I don't contain emotion, the mission fails. Every detail is important. I talked about that accountability, the need for control. Every single detail is important. Think OPSEC, operational security. Every single detail that you talk about is important. People could be listening. You could end up taking somebody's life. must be in control. Lethally armed, everyone is safe. I mentioned that earlier. It's an extension of yourself. It's part of who you are. You're a protector. You need to protect those that are close to you. And you need to protect those that aren't close to you, because that's the role that you signed up for. I am willing to give my life in defense of this nation and the people within it. So the second mission. What does it mean to find a second mission? So a couple questions for you. Just general audience questions, not a group activity. How aware are you and the veterans that you work with, maybe in your work environment or on your campus, of the impacts of military training and experiences on the veteran's life? This is just a mental exercise for you to think about. As you go to your sites for Vet Corps, or you go to your organization, the DEA, or with another agency, start thinking about that. How aware is your agency of how they can uplift their veterans to uplift the program? They have skills. It's not just their MOS. They're a whole individual with knowledge and experience. How can you and the veteran witness their strengths, skills, and values apply in any way? Is that arm raised or are you stretching?
I'm stretching.
Okay. So we'll call him. But what are some creative things that you can do to support that? You want to acknowledge them. You want them to come forward and identify themselves. Because they did do fantastic things. They deserve to be recognized for it. And at a certain point, there's going to be a need to learn which skills, military characteristics to apply and not to apply in different situations, right? It talks about that need for control. 5 minutes late, is that the end of the world? Oh, no. So, our team, when we threw these slides together, we came up with this scale. Now, originally it was a 0 to 10 scale. We didn't particularly like that because the military was on the 0 side. Oh, and so, we edited it a little bit, and it's a little bit more of a fluid scale. Now, you can use this. We encourage you to. It's an interesting concept. And so, the basis behind this is that when you get out of the military, it doesn't just disappear, right? I don't stop being a soldier. I'm a veteran, sure, or I guess if you're a Marine, you're still a Marine forever, right? That culture doesn't go away. And to try to ignore it, or even worse, discourage it, is essentially telling them, I don't like who you are. I don't want you to be the military person. I don't want you to be the veteran because I associate it with whatever negative feelings that I have. I don't recognize you. Maybe that person already didn't recognize themselves. It's even worse. So, we came up with a little bit of a different scale. It's a little fluid, and this goes from 5 to 0 to 5 again. And so maybe when you're working with those student veterans, or you're working with a veteran employee, and just like, you know what, these kids in this class, they're always late, and they're disrespectful to the student or to the teacher, and they never do their homework. And just, man, what do? Well, there's a time and place for it. Maybe instead of being all the way on the 5 in the military scale, you know what, I need you to just kind of back off a little bit, and maybe, let's meet maybe around here, right? Let's be a little less in control of the situation. Let's not self-impose these rules that we have to get to others. Maybe the situation calls for a gentler touch. Let's reduce the acronyms. Maybe they just need to take a break for a little while. Take off the boots. But I want you to also understand that it's still part of you. And that discipline and order is not going to just up and vanish. There's an appropriate time and an appropriate situation for you to 100% lean into your military training. Sometimes it requires more of a civilian perspective. So you can use this skill, and I encourage you to do so. Maybe you can put it into practice. Maybe you can use it to build some curriculum. When's the appropriate time to use these things? So what does it mean to find a second mission? How can you be a liaison? What can you do? That's an actual question. That's not rhetorical.
So I found that I worked in education and now I'm working in more of the employment industry, but being open to conversations. I had a conversation with 2 HR representatives from 2 different Washington State organizations, 2 Washington State departments. It was an interesting conversation because they were like, well, we can't retain veterans, and we don't know why. And so I started talking to them, and really what it turns out is like they have this 0 tolerance policy, right? And you can't have that when you're talking about retaining veterans because we come from a different culture. And if you have no tolerance for this culture that we bring with us, if you don't have if you're not willing to understand where they're coming from and you're always taking the side of somebody else, then you're not going to be retaining veterans, right? And so I had the conversation with them, and I don't think that they really fully took it in because they were like, well, we can't do that because we have to cater to everybody else, right? But I think just being willing to have those conversations and relay your point of view to people who don't understand or don't have that background or had those interactions or really have had any kind of meetings or discussions with anybody that is a veteran, has that background. They don't have anybody that is like that, right? Just being open to discussing in general what that is.
Creating a dialogue.
When I made the remark that I made earlier about the difference between being drafted and enlisting, I wasn't trying to start that whole dialogue, although it was a wonderful dialogue.
That's okay.
But the reason that I asked is because there's a whole aspect of this that I don't see as being covered, and I'm assuming that it's because you started out by saying there are some veterans who come out and they're not unstable. And I'm thinking that probably I'm dealing with more unstable situations. But I find that I deal with a lot of veterans, and many of them that I deal with are the draftees. That when they came out, no matter what they learned or didn't learn, they kind of fall in 2 categories. Number 1, no one's ever going to tell me what to do again. And so I can't work for somebody who's going to tell me what to do. So they can't hold a job because every time a boss tells them what to do, they quit. They're not going to have any part of it. And on the other hand, they're the ones who, they were 18 years old, they came out of their parents' home who had all the rules and took care of them. They went to boot camp, they were in the military told them everything to do and took care of them. They get out and they're waiting for someone to tell them what to do every moment of every day and take care of them. And so how do you take those kinds of situations and say, okay, we're going to transfer this into employability?
It's something to take into consideration. This is very limited in its ability to reflect. Right? I can only speak from my experiences and from those that I've seen. I can't speak to Vietnam War era veterans.
I'm sorry. But you know, this is a real problem that I have to deal with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. This is insightful and it's beneficial, and I appreciate that input because we will take that input and we will improve as we go along. Because, like I said, my experiences is just what I know. But now I've experienced your stories. I've experienced what you've gone through secondhand. And so now I can take this information, I can, as we continue along. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I saw one more hand, two more hands. You're getting short on time, so I will field you real quick, just left to right, and we'll hit the last couple of steps, please.
I'm just the first bullet there on becoming a civilian. Again, I struggle with that in my interactions with employers on how they can engage veteran and military connected community. I think that for me, I would reframe that on for employers to ask a veteran or military connected person in their workforce on, you know, we really value having you as a veteran as part of our community, and you're transitioning from the military space into our workforce. How can we help you be a part of the civilian workforce again? Versus how can you become a civilian? Because my experience with veterans, they're never going to be a civilian. They're always changed.
Okay, so I'm a VSO for the VFW, and I'm also my 11 years as mayor of Dr. Captain, ambassador to the law. My very course is an equal value, and I think that makes a difference when everybody's looking at the barn as some weirdo, well, maybe I don't know. But anyway, that's a little parts out in the city, and it's worked really well. It gave me a lot of latitude to be on the radio and address those events.
So from the class before this, I attended the self-care class. I think that'd be like a perfect the lessons from that would be perfect for kind of reintroducing those things. That's pretty much all.
We talked about sitting and working through our emotions, being present. So we'll go ahead and continue. Let's see. Some of these are some questions that you can use in your mind and maybe tailor it a little bit differently, make it appropriate, that you can use when working with that. How you can be the liaison with that. So we don't have time for group activity. Rome. That was terrible. Aww. That's okay. Yeah, there you go. Now I want my food. Maybe take a picture of it. And ask yourself these questions when you have the opportunity. What does it mean to be better and supported? What do you need to be better and supported? Yourself. What tools do you need to be successful? And is there anything that might prevent a veteran from self-identifying to you and your organization? Right? I mentioned a lot of folks don't believe that they're veterans because they never saw a combat. Maybe change the language on their application forms instead of saying, "Are you a U.S. veteran?" to saying, "Have you ever served in the armed forces?" We actually had that happen with Forces Guiding Units. Now they're changing their intake.
Yeah, so with the agency's work source offices, right, there's a veteran questionnaire. And so you taught the work source offices instead of asking if you're a veteran, asking have you served in the military? Because so many veterans, it's common, I think, in my experience, it's common to see a lot of women veterans and a lot of Vietnam era veterans not identified as veterans.
So maybe changing the language, how we articulate, how we ask that question. Those are great. I implore you to think about these questions because we don't have any more time. They might be useful in your settings, maybe in your academic settings or your work settings. So as a quick wrap up before I let you all free to go eat food, we wanted to describe battle mind to home mind, the war zone mentality, and how that shift can occur as you leave your military service, become veteran status or permanent Marine status. Describing the second mission and how you and the veteran can grow, learning to support each other, right? Uplift those skills that they have. Work with them to identify the skills that maybe they're not aware of. Maybe they don't know that they have skills. It's a choice. And discuss promising best practices that will support the development of your veteran and your organization and your culture. I would argue that having a veteran in your organization is going to likely improve it. They're hard workers, disciplined. Most of the time, from what I've experienced. Here are some useful resources. You are welcome to take a snap. This is for some of the information that I provided concerning skills and relevance and some of the outline online concepts. Just useful to have readily available. And then last but not least, I want to personally thank each and every single one of you for being here today, engaging with me, and having those difficult discussions. There is a QR code if you'd like to take the survey and tell Tom Hove how wonderful I did. Please feel free to scan that. And without further ado, thank you. Have a great lunch.